Welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast. This is Debbie Ronka, your host, and this is the space where we come each and every week to not only hear transition stories, but to also learn from those who have navigated the challenging transitions in life. You see, I believe it's in the struggles and it's in the difficult seasons that we learn so much that we're able to come back to impart and to offer to others who may one day walk in our very same shoes. So today is a conversation about the transition of the loss of health and how when this comes into your life, how do you navigate that pain? How do you confront and embrace the unknown? And how do you discover the new purpose for your life? My guest today is Liz Benditt. After surviving 5 cancers over the course of 12 years, she took her personal experience and she created and launched the balmbox.com. It's a site that features functional self-care and gifts for cancer patients. In addition to being president and CEO of the Balm Box, Liz also teaches undergraduate business marketing courses at the University of Kansas. And she also serves on the Mainstream Coalition Board of Directors and volunteers with the National Charity League. Well, Liz, welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. I love your story. When I read it, I thought, oh, I have to have Liz come on. I love your tenacity. And it was an incredible, painful season in your life. And within that time, you just found ways to help others that came from your own experience and journey. So I am glad that you are here to share with us your story of the loss of your health, your family, and what you've created. So I can't even imagine 5 different cancers. How did that all enter your life?
Gosh, how did I get cancer? I have no idea. I got lucky. I've read a lot about, my understanding, I didn't go to medical school, so we'll just preface with take my my anything I say medical with, from my patient's point of view. Everything I've read about cancer is that we all carry cancer cells in our bodies. It's just a question of some of them break through and some don't. And there are various.
Can we just stop for a minute? Oh my, I just looked at we'll just start from the beginning. I just happened to see that I was muted.
Oh no.
But yet you could hear me.
Yeah.
And so I just happened to see that and I wonder, will that affect the recording? And I thought, I better stop now at the beginning than go through the whole thing. I apologize.
Yeah. No, that's no problem.
I was facilitating a series on a teaching before this call, and we had to stay muted in order to watch the video. And I don't know why I was still muted. That's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to just take us from the top. The editor will take care of everything.
Okay.
Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Benditt, like bend it, don't break it.
Okay, so I did say Benditt. Okay, I wanted to make sure. As I said that, I went, oh, I meant to ask her. Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, we're going to take it from the top again.
No problem. That was a long intro. I'm sorry you have to do it again.
Oh, no. That's good. That's really good. I'm fine. Okay,
Okay.
Here we go. Welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast. This is Debbie Ronka, your host, and this is the space that we come in each and every week to hear transition stories and to also learn from those who have navigated the difficult and challenging transitions in life. You know, it's in the struggles and it's in the difficult seasons that we learn so much. And I always find it's a space and a time for us to impart and to offer to others what we have learned, because one day someone else will walk in our very shoes. Today's conversation is about the transition of the loss of health. What do we do with that when that comes into our life? How do we navigate that pain? How do we confront all of the unknown? And how do we still find purpose for our life? Well, my guest today is Liz Benditt, and after surviving 5 cancers over the course of 12 years. She took her personal experience and created and launched the bombbox.com. This is a site that features functional self-care and gifts for cancer patients. And in addition to being president and CEO of the Balm Box, Liz also teaches undergraduate business marketing courses at the University of Kansas and also serves on the Mainstream Coalition Board of Directors and volunteers with the National Charity League. Liz, I want to thank you and welcome for being with me here today on the Transition Bridge podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's truly an honor. When I read your story, I was just compelled to have you on because I love the stories of people who have really navigated something very challenging in life, and out of that, they birthed something that actually becomes a gift to others who are going to come behind you and go through a similar experience. So I'm excited to hear about the Balm Box and your whole story. So you have survived 5 cancers over the course of 12 years. And so were you just basically a healthy person and then
Yeah.
you got this diagnosis?
It's really crazy. I have no idea. I have done so many genetic tests to see if I carry any of the known, markers for cancer, everything from the BRCA gene to there were like literally 150 genes, I think, on the last test that they did, and I did not score on any of them. So my blood is still sitting in a vial in a database for researchers. So when they find the
Wow.
new, but the entire genome isn't mapped. So who knows? I'm sure, my best guess is that I do have a genetic predisposition to getting cancer, but the actual predisposition or the problematic gene is still unknown. That is my very rote non-medical understanding.
You gotta be
I
so
like to
shocked when
say,
you got when you got the fact that you don't even have the genes, and yet were they 5 different types of cancer?
I've had 4 different types of cancer. I've had 2 breast cancers, I got 2 breast cancers, 2 skin cancers, and 1 thyroid. I had melanoma. That was my very first cancer. That one was bananas. I thought I had a mole. I did have a mole on my leg, and it turned out that the mole was actually cancer. And it was one of those things where the doctor was like, okay, well, I don't care what's on your schedule. You're going to clear it, and we're going to have surgery by the end of the week. And if it has spread to your lymph nodes, you'll have less than a year to live. And if it hasn't, then wear more sunscreen. Like, those were the choices. It
Oh,
was
two
crazy.
extremes. Two extremes. Oh
It
my gosh.
it was crazy. And my son was 1. He was a baby. My daughter was 3. She was a toddler. They were too small to understand. I got the news on my drive-in to work. Um, at the time I was an executive at a commercial finance company. I did no work that week. I called my mom, who was literally boarding a plane to go to China. My dad was working in China on this assignment for a couple of months, and she hadn't seen him in like 3 weeks, and she was really excited to go visit and be a tourist. And I told her, okay, well, I have melanoma and I have to have I have to have surgery. Have a nice trip. And she turned to the stewardess, and this is after 9/11, and she was like, I have to get off this plane. It was a really big deal, and I'm sure lots of hateful side eyes she got, but she got off the plane. They got her off the plane, and she was with us all weekend, and it was kind of amazing because we didn't know. It was Friday had the surgery, and they had to wait till Monday to find out whether or not it had spread.
Oh,
So it was
what a long weekend.
crazy. And I think that with children being so small and just little need machines, they were just a wonderful distraction, like they don't really know that you're waiting on the pathology results and whether or not mom will still be here. It was more of a like, okay, let's at bath time, like where's the bubble bath? Like it just I don't want to eat this mac and cheese. Give me an apple instead. They just were so tending to them was very good, right? Like it's very helpful. And then we got the news on Monday afternoon and all of a sudden we could breathe. And I became like a crazy sunscreen hoarder. We there's we my family, my poor children were the first ones to wear like the swim shirts. Now all these babies are wearing these long sleeve like full cover
Yes.
swimwear. And it's so smart. That stuff wasn't around when because my kids are teenagers now. So anyway, they hats, sunscreen, I put that additive in my summer clothes that makes them all SPF 100. So yeah, I am crazy about the sun, which is probably good. I don't look my age because I have been very aggressive about sunscreen because of that. So yeah, that was my first cancer. 11 months later, I went in for just an annual mammogram. I had started them early because my mother had breast cancer when she was in her early 40s. And they saw something abnormal, and so the doctor, as anyone knows, when you go to see the breast doctor, they feel you up, and then the breast doctor, her fingers are all over the boob, and then she started crawling up, and she's like, she noticed a lump in my neck, and it turned out at that time whatever was going on at the mammogram was nothing. It was just abnormal cells, but it turned out that I had thyroid cancer. And so the thyroid cancer was completely crazy. Um, After all this rush, when you go through the melanoma, they're like, okay, we got to get you under the knife as soon as humanly possible. With thyroid, it's such a slow growing cancer. They're like, okay, well, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we should really have surgery. And, you hear that you have cancer and you just want it out, right? It's very stressful. But on the other hand, it was a gift, it was an absolute gift, especially, I had small kids working full time, being able to like plan and manage childcare. And it was right around my son's birthday party. So like, I was like, okay, well, let's knock out his birthday before, and then I'll have my surgery. Like it was actually kind of great to be able to plan. What we did not plan for is that I ended up in this itty bitty, teeny tiny, eeny weeny percentage of patients that had this bizarre side effect. It happens to 2% of patients where I became what's called hypocalcemic as a result of my thyroid surgery. So there are glands next to your thyroid called the parathyroid glands, and they process calcium in the bloodstream. And for whatever reason, when my thyroid was removed, even though they didn't actually cut them, they could have, they didn't, they just stopped working. But nobody knew. And so I got released, the 24 hours, 23 hours, I think, afterwards, so that it didn't count right as an overnight stay. You know how they
Yeah.
play with the insurance that way.
Uh-huh.
And, um, and I was happy to go home. I didn't want to be there. And, but my lips were a little bit numb, and they're like, yeah, that's a little bit normal. Everyone's a little hypocalcemic after surgery. And I got home, and all of a sudden I couldn't feel my hands and my whole face was numb. And so we called and
Oh,
said, is this normal? Like, no, you're in the middle of hypocalcemic shock, get to the ER. And they had to give me IV calcium. And the issue is that my body just could not accept anything other than IV calcium. So I was in the hospital for 10 days while they tried to figure out a cocktail that would keep me alive, or essentially of over-the-counter drugs, and like, why was my body crashing? And it was just absolutely a miserable experience. The worst night was when they were trying to figure out exactly how long, various medications would last. And so I had to have a blood draw every hour on the hour so that they could look at
oh,
it. Like, I mean, talk about feeling like a lab experiment, right?
yeah.
Uh, and so they eventually found a combination of drugs that kept me alive, but I felt like absolute garbage, right? Like I was so exhausted. I was suffering from terrible fatigue. Um, I just, I was gaining weight. I just could not like muster the energy. And I thought, this is just not normal, right? Like I get that I have a busy lifestyle, but like this, I wasn't this tired when my kids weren't sleeping through the night. Something is wrong. And I complained about that to my endocrinologist at the time. And he's like, you're a working mom. Working moms are always tired. And he blew me
Oh
off.
gosh.
And I thought in my head, I'm like, and you're fired, right? Like, I don't need this. Like, I need someone to hear me. When I say something's wrong,
Mhm.
it's wrong. And so, I, I won't go into all of the details, but long story short, I found a combination. I found a different endocrinologist who had a 1 year waiting list. And so while I was waiting to get to see that new endocrinologist, a friend turned me on to this, kind of crunchy MD doctor who ran a med spa. And she was one of these ladies who was on the pioneering edge of giving people Botox injections for migraines, which is now actually a very common treatment. But at
Mhm.
the time, it was really, really rare. And so she looked at all of my blood and stuff, and she said, this is really consistent with somebody um, that is allergic to gluten and is celiac, and maybe just drop gluten and see what happens. And we're going to give you some extra vitamins and put you on this very specific diet. And within 6 weeks, I felt like I woke up. I started running again. I had all this energy. My mental acuity was better. I didn't have that brain fog.
Mhm.
So something was going on. And I do think that the nutrition made a huge difference in terms of just kind of approaching a different way of eating. It's not like I wasn't eating healthfully before, it's just different.
Right.
And so that was, I think, the moment where you talk about, going through all these different cancers, where I realized, it's not all or nothing. I'm still going to take the medication. I need synthetic thyroid hormone. I need my calcitriol, which is what, helps me absorb calcium in a way that normal humans do. But there's also the homeopathic stuff, right? So can I also, if I drop gluten and I change my exercise schedule and I make sure that I get enough vitamin C, right? All of these things I think work together. And it was a big aha for me that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? You don't have to just go the homeopathic route, and you don't have to just go like what the doctors say, because all doctors can do is write prescriptions, right? Like
Right.
they can't solve everything. And so that was the big moment, which then takes me to the third cancer, which was much less serious from a medical standpoint, but I had basal cell on my nose. And the first doctor that I went to, because at that point, I'm seeing my dermatologist every 6 months, you strip naked, they look at every inch of your body. It's a very humbling
Oh
experience.
my word. I can't
But it's
imagine.
so important. Everyone should do it.
Sure.
Yeah, it didn't have to be naked for her to see the piece on my nose. And so she looked at the thing on my nose, and it turns out it was basal cell, which is good. It was caught before it got any worse. But you can't see in this because I have got good lighting right now, but I'm very freckled. And so normally what they would do is if you had like a normal smooth skin like you do, Debbie, you would take like a little chunk of skin from your neck and use that to replace the skin that they remove on your nose, and it would just blend. But because of my freckle pattern, you can't do that. It would just look like a patch, right, on my face. And
Oh,
so what the first plastic surgeon wanted to do is he wanted to cut from the inside of like between my eye and my nose down my kind of like the laugh line of your cheek all the way
mhm.
down and create like a C-shaped scar on my face. And then that would allow them enough movement and loose skin to cover the piece that they would have to cut off on my nose. And I was like, so I'm going to have a C-shaped like monster scar on my face the rest of my life. And he goes, yes, when should we schedule your surgery? And I'm like, well, maybe I'm going to get a second opinion. And so I
Oh,
went to a different doctor, and he was like, actually, we have this totally new, different process. It's super crazy, but what we'll do is we'll cut right along the shadow of your nose where it's not noticeable. And then we will stretch the skin, put a bandage over it, and let that stretch for 10 days. And then you come back and the skin will have loosened up enough that we can sew it right up, and we won't need to actually relocate the skin or do anything. And so
mm,
that, let me just tell you, far more complex surgery. Having to do two sucks. The 10 days of wearing this giant sewn on patch on my nose was bananas, but I chose it, right? It was like I
right.
was doing that to save my face so that I wouldn't have the big scar. And so I did it happily. And again, so you kind of learn through these processes and these experiences that there's choices, and that there's as much art as science as there for doctors, right? That they're depending on their point of view and their experience, they might have different treatment plans, and that as a patient, it's really important to be part of that, right?
Yes.
Like to be an active member of your treatment team to me was so important, which then, so luckily I learned all of this stuff on earlier cancers, so that when in 2017, when I had my first breast cancer, I knew to ask questions. I knew to explore options. I knew that, if I didn't like something, that I didn't have to, that I could question it, that I don't have to set myself up to be the recipient of a medical overlord, if that makes sense, right?
It
Um,
does.
and so I chose treatments understanding what how they were going to affect my life after, right? So, for example, I was lucky that there was no real need to get a mastectomy. I didn't want one. I had a lumpectomy at the time. And with 8 weeks of radiation treatment. And the 8 weeks of radiation treatment would take me from 40% odds of recurrence to something like a 15% odds of recurrence. And so I was like, okay, those numbers work for me. And then at the time they said, okay, well, now if you want to go on tamoxifen, you're in your 30s, but early 40s, you can go on tamoxifen, go into menopause, have just this long list of side effects, and that's going to take you from maybe 15% chance of recurrence to 8. And I was like, just I'm just not yeah, I think I'm gonna skip it. Lo and behold, 2022, I had another breast cancer. But it was not a recurrence. It was a totally different breast cancer, completely unrelated to the other one. So I don't know that the tamoxifen would have made a huge difference. Had a
Mhm.
long conversation with my current oncologist about that, and she said, it probably was there to begin with, and maybe the tamoxifen would have put it off a couple of years, but you still would have had it. And that one, unfortunately, was much bigger. It was in the opposite breast, and I went to 3 different doctors to make sure that the breast was a goner, and all 3 were like, "You gotta chop it off." They said it in much nicer ways. I'm just paraphrasing.
Right.
And so I did, but I did so knowing that I had explored every option, so I was at peace with it, right?
Yes.
And I think that, there are a lot of women in that scenario that would have said, "Well, just take them both, get rid of them." For a variety of reasons, I didn't wanna do that. But again, like, I think being an active member of my treatment team, deciding what I wanted to do, talking to multiple people, and by the way, all 3 surgeons and medical centers had slightly different approaches to how they would do things. So again, there's no, especially with cancer in particular, and I imagine this is true of pretty much any illness, there is very rarely a very standard treatment plan that is not up for discussion, right? Like there's just a lot of nuance to it. And one of the things that I learned through all of this is that doctors are great at writing prescriptions. They're less great at recommending an ice pack that won't leak through your clothes, or, the benefit of ginger mints to carry around when you're feeling nauseous, or, all these things that really do help genuinely, but at the same time they're not prescription, they're just over the counter stuff. Especially when I had all of my breast cancers, man, getting the weight of your arms just bugs your boobs. It does.
Mhm.
They rub on the side, wherever you're moving, just you want, at least I did, and I think this is true of most lumpectomy and mastectomy patients, you just don't want anything pressing on your chest. And you want everything off your chest, including your arms. And so having pillow products that fit under your arms specifically, like I was constantly trying to look for things with like a shape, like a U shape that would fit under my arm. And like twisting up towels and stuff. And it's just craziness to me that the products didn't exist that would actually make those things better. And the
Yeah, so
one
I think this is a great place to jump in and hear about your Balm
Balm
Box.
Box, yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, you've been through something, you understand the discomfort and like the thing you wish you had. And so tell us about this Balm Box that you've
Well,
created for cancer
the
survivors.
one of the things that I think happens when you have cancer, going back to like some of the interesting benefits, are you see who your posse is, right? The people that are there for you, that there's your core group of friends that are going to be there no matter what, friends and family, but then there's like this secondary group that all of a sudden shows up, and it's kind of amazing. And I think that that's like one of the most beautiful, I don't know, for me it was really amazing. Like one of the parents that were part of the like, the PTA that I knew through, socially, she came to visit multiple times and brought food and was just like such a comfort, and someone that was
Mhm.
really just not a close friend at the time, but now I think of her very differently. Two different breast cancer survivors that were part of, again, just the crowd that I knew from my kids' elementary school, showed up in the most amazing ways, right? And so, in terms of recommendations and products, and just having someone to talk through their process and the choices they made, it was incredible. One of them came with me to one of the appointments where they're, when you have a mastectomy, they put in something called an expander, which is like essentially a placeholder breast form in your body, and it's super weird. And there's like this like magnetic thing on the top, and put saline in it a little bit at a time. And you can't take, at least I have big boobs, and so you can't take all of the saline at once. You have to go back every week or so to get a little bit more until you get the size that you're looking for to match. And so she's sitting there looking at my boobs saying, a little more, no, a little less. Like, having someone that to sit there and and watch the saline go into your boob and not be completely freaked out by it is amazing, right? Like those kinds of friends are incredible. So anyway, going back to the Balm Box. So back in 2017, after my fourth cancer, I started thinking, where is, everyone is bringing me all of this pink stuff, especially when you have breast cancer. You get a
Mhm.
lot of pink warrior t-shirts and, my tatas tried to kill me hats and, all of this stuff. And it's so well meaning, but really in the moment, like I said, I was looking for pillows that would get the weight of my arms off my chest, and,
You
and
wanted
I
the
wanted like a
practical
burn
things.
salve.
Yeah, you wanted the
Yes.
practical items. Yeah,
And
so
so
what
I'm
is
sitting
on your
there
site?
searching on Google for all this stuff, and people are bringing you all this stuff. And so the first thing I did, when the pandemic hit, is I wrote a survey. And in the survey, I asked, have you had cancer before? Have you gone through treatment? If you have, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate these like 50 different items that you might want to receive. And if you hadn't had cancer, you would down a bit different path. Have you bought a gift for a cancer patient? And what's amazing is that of the people that had not had cancer but had bought a gift for cancer patient, it was something like 75% of adults had bought a gift for a cancer patient in the last 15 months. I mean, 75%, it's amazing. This is a huge market. And then when you ask cancer patients to rate items, the things that you want on a rate, scale of 1 to 5, the worst performing items, I should say, the ones that got ones across the board, nobody wants this stuff. Kicking cancer tote bags, kicking cancer coffee mugs, Worry Stone's inspirational poetry. And when you ask them the things that they do want, it's all functional: fleece blankets, lip balm, lotion, ice packs, right? Like things that are going to be useful. And so that was really where the idea for the Balm Box was born. And so went through a couple different iterations. My first thought was it would be a subscription box that you would buy for people going through radiation or chemo, or like an individual gift box. I kind of played around with different things. I eventually dropped the subscription plan, and ultimately ended up with really thoughtful collection of packages based on your treatment plan. So you've got a radiation box, there's a chemo box, there's the rest and recovery box, because I'm telling you, it doesn't, after the treatment ends, you still have a couple months of just trying to get your life back together, but still being really exhausted. And then there's just the generic cancer box, because a lot of times as a friend or family member, especially if you're not close by, you're not totally sure where people are in their treatment plan. So something like a box that's a little bit of everything is always a good option.
So what is the difference then between the radiation box and the chemo box? Like,
So when you're going through radiation, skin, right, obviously is, the number one concern. And so I actually worked with a local business. One of the things, that I learned when I was going through radiation, is that pain management is really tricky. When you Which makes research on pain really tricky, right? Because when you and I are going through the same thing, I might say my pain is an 8, and you might be experiencing the same thing but qualify it as a 6, right? And so these things are just really, really subjective, and they're hard. And so, but one of the things that I learned through my like really deep, like page 22 Google research, is that there's some really interesting research on the use of calendula oil, to treat burn victims. And so then I went down the path of trying to find a lotion with the highest concentration of calendula oil to help with my radiation burns. And when I finally found this lotion at the time, it was super expensive. It was, something like $25 an ounce. It was very
Mhm.
expensive. But it worked. It was
Right.
amazing. And my skin changed immediately. And it took the sting out of the burn, the
Yeah.
feeling. And so I shared all that information with a local company called Polish Your Parts, and they created a burn balm for us, which is
Wow, that's
amazing.
awesome.
So like that, the burn balm, there's a seatbelt barrier, there's the ice packs that won't sweat through your clothes. So those are the kinds of things in for example, the radiation box, whereas you have like a mastectomy box that has like the side pillows that will fit under your arms, the seatbelt pillow to protect your chest from the seatbelt, ice packs, and then all the other various things like lip balms and lotions and essential oils, things to make you feel better.
That's
That are
incredible.
non-prescription, obviously.
Right. But as a friend of a friend who would have cancer, what a great gift, to
Oh,
be able to
totally.
bring to your friend and feel like you're in some way bringing comfort, in some way trying to step into that space with your friend or your loved one and say, hey, I've heard about this on Balm Box and here you
I,
go.
One of the, I think, fallacies with cancer, and because I follow a lot of, online groups and whatnot, I think is that there's almost this unwritten perspective that the more I suffer, the better, then the better I'll get. And it's just not true, right? Like it's just that I think one of the things that I've learned through this whole process is it's not necessary to suffer so much, and that even just choosing these functional items and feeling empowered is at least for me, was incredibly useful, right? It made me feel a little bit more in control because you do lose control. I think you'd mentioned in the setup, one of the worst parts of cancer is that you have to kind of give up your life for a bit and you lose control over your schedule, over you don't know when you're going to feel well, you don't know how much energy you're going to have, you don't know how much brain power you're going to have. So how you allocate these finite resources when you're used to having all of it is really, really difficult and really miserable. And especially as a control freak like myself, that was by far one of the hardest parts. And so I feel like having a box full of tools
Mhm.
empowers you to a certain extent, empowers a patient to
Sure.
feel like there's, you can do something to make yourself feel better. You don't have to sit in misery.
So I found this quote, which I think kind of fits into what you just shared. The quote is, cancer may have started the fight, but I will finish it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
it sounds like, yeah, you have to get in the fight and bring your tools and do all of those things. One of the things that I noticed in your story, and just listening to you, so your children were very young with your first diagnosis, and uh, obviously
My
were
daughter
growing
wrote
up.
about my cancer as one of her college application essays. Oh yeah,
I love
it's
that. So
been part of her life. Yeah.
yeah, you said you didn't want your children to grow up to be victims. So I
No.
know that I'm sorry?
Yeah, no, no.
Yeah, so your family, like families are impacted when cancer comes to the household. So how did your family rally together? Like use this as a time to encourage and um, others that, are in that situation right now. How did you as a family with your kids walk through this?
For my first two cancers, they were too little. They just didn't,
Right.
they were babies. But as they've gotten older, I think there have been a number of amazing benefits, right? So one is they learn to do their own laundry. And I mean, at a really young age, and they learned to, like, there were many a night where just dinner wasn't happening, and my daughter at 12 years old just made scrambled eggs and toast for everybody. Great, dinner's served, right? Like this idea of being flexible and versatile and just rolling with the punches, and mom may or may not be available today, but she'll be better later. I think that there've been all of that, I think, has been really, really good for them. I think the other thing that's come through all of this is that I do think that they're kinder, gentler people. Like people, they didn't necessarily share with everyone they knew that mom was sick. And so conversely, we've had conversations about, well, so and so was really mean to me today. They snapped, they were being really cranky. Maybe there's something going on at home that I don't know about. Right? So understanding that the world is bigger than just what they see, and that and having that kind of patience for friends or acquaintances that um are acting inappropriately is amazing. I think that's a great gift. I didn't get that as a kid. I held grudges like you would not believe. So I think that's been really good for them. So the resiliency has been really good for them. The flexibility has been really good for them. And I think also nowadays, cancer doesn't have to be, I mean, don't get me wrong, plenty of people die and it
Right.
could happen. So I don't want to minimize that. But at the same time, if it's caught early enough and you take good enough care of yourself, it's treatable. So they're not freaked out by, oh, you have a cancer. Well, that's gonna suck for a bit. It's gonna be a rough year, but we'll be fine. And I think that that's been good. I think it's been good. I mean, I can't change it. So you gotta
Well,
take the
I
good
think
with the
too,
bad.
what you learn is life is fragile. And then
Yeah,
when you see the fragility of life, and then you just realize every day is precious. And I think when you're in a battle like this, each day is so significant. Um, you're, I find whenever I'm around people who have cancer, I find them to be the most grateful, joyful people because they're
yeah.
always in this mindset of the joy is healthy for their body. And
You
they're
do,
seeing the things
yes.
in life that
Yeah.
they're grateful for, and they're more expressive, and it's just life itself. The value goes up because you're just it's fragile now, and you're in a battle. So I'm always inspired by those who are in the battle, their perspective, their outlook.
I've learned that from my grandmother. My
Mm,
grandparents in particular, both my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. They met in hiding in Poland in World War II. It's a crazy
oh,
story. And growing up, my grandfather was always very bitter. Like, oich, how we suffered. Oich, oich, that is the
mhm,
and my grandmother was joyful. She felt like she was given a second life and was so grateful for everything that she had, and my just love my mother and me and my babies. She just was so she ch- I learned that she chose to be happy, right?
yeah,
You can suffer and acknowledge it, right? I don't mean to diminish it, because all
yeah,
of these things came with a great deal of pain. And don't get
yes.
me wrong, it's not like I got my cancer diagnosis and I just threw my hands in there and said, "Oh, that's gonna suck." Like I was upset. But so you have to acknowledge the hurt. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like, choosing to be joyful is a choice, and I had that modeled for me that growing up, and I totally credit my grandmother.
Mm. Yeah, both of your grandparents. That's incredible. God bless them. Wow, what a story. Gosh, I want to hear that one day. That's got to be
Yeah.
so incredible. Well, in closing, I just know there's someone listening right now that is either in the midst of cancer or knows of someone who is. And, sometimes our health is not valued till sickness comes, and they're just in that
True.
place despondent, maybe don't have hope. They just need some inspiration. So, what would you share?
Um, I would share a couple of things. There's no silver bullet. I wish there was. I really
Mhm.
do. I wish I could say, if you just do this one thing, you will be fine. But
Right.
I think that I think acknowledging that there's no silver bullet and there's no one piece of advice that is going to get you through it. Um, and you take a step back and look at the broader picture. So the broader picture is, one, while modern medicine has not cured cancer. In the past 20 years, modern medicine has made amazing strides in treating cancer. And so, focusing on treatment and extending your life, you can live, even patients with metastatic cancer are living longer and longer, thanks to ongoing, really interesting treatment. So, starting with, okay, what's most important is choosing the treatment plan that aligns with your values, your body, and what you're willing to put yourself through, right? And so then evaluate those choices. Decide what you want to do because there will be choices. There is if any doctor says to you, this is exactly how you must go forward, I would find a second doctor to just validate that, right? No matter where you are, always so important to at least get at least one other, and I'm saying medical opinion. And then the third is once you start treatment, your only options your don't rely just on doctors for relief. There are so many non-prescription great options out there to help you feel better. Everything from, like I said, obviously things from the Balm Box, right? That's what I'm here to say. But at the same time, it's making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that bring you joy or people that bring you comfort and making sure that you take time to rest. Every time that I have had a relapse has been because I have not rested long enough. Um, I and that's really and learn how to ask for help, and that would be the fourth thing, ask for help. It is very difficult to go through all these treatments by yourself, so whether you're married or single, and it doesn't really matter, just make sure you're surrounding yourself with friends and family that will help you, and be in a position where you can get help. How's that?
Now, that's great advice. And yes, you are one when I see this quote, I had cancer, cancer never had me. I see you as one, and there's so many people out there listening that I can say, yes, that's me. I may have it, but it doesn't have me. And you've given such great advice and multiple counsel of wisdom, hearing from different medical doctors, surrounding yourself with community, and believe, and just take
Yes,
each day
yeah.
moving forward. And so I just want to encourage everyone who's listening today. I pray that Liz's story has brought you encouragement. I love how you walked your family through this, and everyone has come through this together as a unit. And I have this one last quote. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete.
Mm.
So you must have compassion on yourself. Get that Balm Box. I'll have Liz's contact information, balmbox.com, BALM box.com, but I'll have it in my show.
Thebalmbox.com, THEBALMBOX.com.
I will have it in the show notes. And so reach out. This is something that you can give as a gift to others and also have compassion and self-care for yourself. So I just want to thank you, Liz, for being here with us today. And also to my transition tribe. Thank you for coming each and every week as we embrace, grow, and are transformed by the purpose and the power of the transitions in life.